Hi, Girl Scouts. It's nice to see you all, and welcome to Inspiring Futures. So we're going to get started. And my name's Katie Herstein, and I'm the Program and Events Manager at Girl Scouts of Colorado. So in my job, I get to be the one who hosts this virtual series for Girl Scouts where they get to meet women in a whole variety of professions. So you can get inspired of what your future might look like. And we have the perfect partner that's working with us, and it's called College Invest. So College Invest, they're a Colorado college savings program. So it makes it easy to save for your education after high school. So it's kind of a way of saying that they exist for just one reason, and that's to help you and your families put away money to save for your inspired future. So I actually started a College Invest savings plan for my girls, who are both Girl Scouts, actually, when we moved to Colorado 10 years ago. And I now have a daughter who is going off to college next year. And we've put away money with College Invest to help pay for that. So it's been very helpful. And it's College Invest is kind of like a piggy bank, but it's even better because the money that your parents or grandparents or caregivers put in, it's tax-free. So your money goes even further. And it can be used to send you to college, anywhere around the country. Or you can go to a trade school or apprenticeship where you'll get real world experience. And now we're going to hear a little message from the CEO of College Invest.
Hi, I'm Angela Beyer, CEO of College Invest, and welcome to this episode of Inspiring Futures. Through Girl Scouts, you've learned that if you can dream it, you can do it. And here at College Invest, Colorado's education savings program, we help you get there. And you're never too young to begin to imagine your inspired future. So how will you impact this world? Will you run your own business, invent a new technology, or maybe even discover a life-saving cure? But wherever your inspiration takes you, a College Invest savings plan can help make your dreams a reality. Now, prepare to be inspired.
Thanks for that message from Angela at College Invest. So before we get started, there's a few housekeeping things. So we're going to be recording this session, and it's going to be put up on YouTube. But what we'll do is we'll block out your faces and things, so that won't be a public facing. But we would love to see your video and chat with you and things like that during the presentation today. So feel free to show us your faces and chat with us and everything, and that'll be awesome. So next up is our Girl Scout Law and Promise. All right, and feel free to chime along with me. So on my honor, I will try to serve God and my country, help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. And the Girl Scout law is, I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. I love that last line. And lastly, I want to introduce our speaker today. So we are being joined today by Gussie Mccracken, and she is a paleobotanist. And she studies the ecological relationship between ancient plants and insects. So her current research is on 67 to 65 million years old fossils in Colorado Springs. So it kind of captures what Colorado used to look like before and after the dinosaurs went extinct due to the asteroid impact that was 66 million years old. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome Gussie.
Hi, Girl Scouts. I hope you're all doing well tonight. And I'm so excited to be here and to talk with you. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to stop me and we can chat about it. I'm Dr. Gussie Mccracken. I'm a paleontologist at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Does anybody know what a paleontologist does?
dig up old things.
That is exactly right. Yeah. So we dig up old things and we study essentially ancient life. And to be able to be a paleontologist, especially a research scientist, I went to college right here in Colorado. I went to Colorado College down in the Springs. And then I went to the East Coast and got my PhD, or Doctor of Philosophy, from University of Maryland. And that is outside of DC, where I worked at the Smithsonian. But it's really nice to be back here. I've always loved the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and I'm excited to kind of talk to you guys about it. Okay, so paleobotany. Paleo meaning ancient, botany, study of plants. So my job and what I love to do is to study ancient plant life. You can see here on the right, I have some really beautiful old 75 million year old fossil leaves and 67 million year old fossil leaves. These were growing in the American West. The top one is Utah and the bottom one is Montana. And they were growing during the age of the dinosaurs. And so I'm really looking at those kind of lower trophic levels of these dinosaur habitats. And then I like to study plants a little bit younger in time. And these are the plants that either survived the asteroid impact that killed off the dinosaurs or evolved immediately afterwards. And so you can see these two bean pods. They kind of look like black, like edamame pods. They're actually the oldest fossil beans that anyone has ever found in the fossil record. And they're from right here in Colorado. And they date to about 65 million years old. So I dug these up down outside of Colorado Springs. And they basically help us learn about when beans evolved, because obviously as humans, we love the bean family. You know, we eat soy, we eat black beans, kidney beans, you know, black-eyed peas, hummus, you name it, we eat it. So we can trace this back into the fossil record and we can think about why certain plants evolved. In the instance of the legumes or the bean family, it's probably because they were delicious to eat. So things like to eat them and then spread the seeds around. So one of the things I did with the younger girls, but I'm not going to ask you guys to do because I know you're, you know, a little bit older and a little bit more mature. So I think you've seen this chart before, maybe in your biology classes. And I just wanted to explain like why I study plants and not cool things like dinosaurs. So plants are the baseboard, the cornerstone of land-based ecosystems. They provide us oxygen that we breathe. So they're, you know, critically important to all life on Earth. And then they provide food for a lot of animals that we call herbivores. So we're omnivores, we eat a lot of plants as humans, but other things like herbivorous insects or these things like mice. And then this also plants support the predators that then eat those herbivores. And so when you understand plants in an ecosystem or in an ancient ecosystem, it really gives you a good idea of what what kinds of things were being supported by those plant populations. So as a paleobotanist, it doesn't really narrow down what I study because plants are thought to have evolved about 480 million years old. Here are some of the oldest plant fossils that we actually know of. They're from the UK. These are called Cooksonia, and they're about 420 million years old. And these are such ancient plants that they actually predate, they lived before leaves evolved, before seeds evolved, before flowers evolved. So these early, 420 million year old ecosystems just had things that looked like Cooksonia growing. They're basically stems. So it's really wild to think about kind of the earliest plants that we know of. And then we can look at really kind of fun, cool, critical times in Earth's history and figure out how ecosystems might have been changing with things like extinction events or climate change. So here in Colorado, if you were standing around 66 million years ago, it would have been a bad day for you because a giant asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula, which is right outside offshore of Mexico. And basically, it decimated all life on the surface of the Earth. So about, they think somewhere around 70 to 80% of all life went extinct 66 million years ago. If you were on the surface of the Earth, you were sort of eviscerated. And this extinction event included all of the dinosaurs. Well, I should say non-avian dinosaurs, because birds today are dinosaurs. And they clearly still made it. But all of the big dinosaurs that you think of walking around, T-Rex, Triceratops, those all went extinct, along with a lot of plants and a lot of other animals. And so using the fossil record that I study, especially here in Colorado, we can start to build these ecosystems back up and understand how they recovered. So, you know, the asteroid decimates the Earth. You're not going to get a rainforest popping up 2 years later. It comes in stages. So we think about 85 to 1,000 years after the asteroid hit, we get essentially oceans of ferns happening. So it would be mostly ferns as far as your eye could see, which is kind of wild to think about. Ferns just blanketing the whole Earth, not just Colorado, but the whole Earth. And then we start to see succession of other life forms coming in. So this is about 300,000 years after the asteroid impact. And we can see a lot more is happening in these ecosystems. As a paleobotanist, the first thing I look at is the plant life. So there are a bunch of different kinds of palms. And these palms have these incredibly nutrient seeds, and they are supporting a bunch of other life. So the dinosaurs go extinct, and then there's what we call a lot of ecological space that can be filled, what we call niches. And so mammals start to become really diverse, and mammals are, remember, things with hair, like humans. And so mammals at this time, 300,000 years after the asteroid impact event, are getting really big, they're getting really diverse, and they're eating these cool plants like the palms, and later on, a little bit later on, things like those legumes or the beans that I had showed you earlier. So here we have Loxolophus, kind of in the background, and that's an animal that you wouldn't see running around Colorado today, but we find evidence of those fossils just down right in the springs. And so from those ecosystems, from all the fossil plants and animals that we pull out of Colorado and elsewhere on Earth, we can understand parts of the evolution of modern ecosystems. You know, we can see the beginnings of plant life that we find all over the Earth today. We can try to figure out why we have the diversity of plants that we have. So how many of you guys have been to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science before? Some of you? Yeah, nice. Or really, you know, getting to any natural history museum is super fun. I know it's not always easy to do, and you know, other things come up, but it's really incredible to go to the fossil hall called Prehistoric Journey here at DMNS. And you can see a bunch of great skeletons of dinosaurs, there's a little boy looking at that bison latifrons, which is an extinct bison species that we had running around the plains of Colorado 100,000 years ago. And what's really interesting about the museum is that I always think of it sort of as an iceberg. So when you're in the exhibit, you're only seeing the top of the iceberg. But what we know about icebergs is that the majority of that ice body is actually hidden under the water. And so the museum is similar because all of our collections, a lot of what we're actively researching, what scientists are looking at, what we're digging up and bringing back to the museum is stored here at the Denver Museum 2 floors underground. And that helps us keep the temperature really consistent and the humidity really consistent. And it helps us keep those fossils in great shape. So here you're looking at some racks of fossil vertebrates, things with backbones. You're looking at some skulls, and it's fossils and also casts, so replicas that we've made of some of our fossils. And then that was just one shelving unit, and all of these shelves are full of fossils. We have over 4 million specimens in the museum throughout all of our departments. And the Department of Earth Sciences, which has paleontology in it, is just one of those departments. And so some of the cool things that I just wanted to show you guys, just sitting around waiting to be studied, we have Triceratops skulls. There are a couple there. There's that beautiful Irish elk, which is a relative of the elks that are running around Colorado today. And then we have this amazing, enormous fish that was found in Aspen, Colorado in 1967. And it's about 75 million years old. I'm really glad they're extinct. I would not want to go into any ocean where that Xivactinus was swimming around. But what I really care about are not as, they're specimens that aren't as splashy, as cool, but they have so much scientific value. I'm mostly interested in the fossil leaves. So I'm going to show you a little video of me opening up one of our cabinets, pulling out a drawer, and you can see how we store our fossil leaves. And so these are, we have about 100,000 specimens. Each of those boxes contains a specimen. And what's really fun is that we go out into the field, we dig these up, we bring them back, we study them. That's sort of the flow of what we do. But as a paleobotanist, I can find hundreds of fossils in a day. And the cool thing is, there is such a big diversity of fossil plants that, for instance, this cool leaf that I'm showing you now, it's undescribed. It is not described by science. So our job is to figure out what kind of a fossil plant this might have been, and then give it a name. And then also try to figure out, what was ecologically important. Was it, food for something kind of interesting, or was it a vine? Was it a tree? Things like that. And so myself and my colleagues at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and now you guys, are the first to really ever see this cool undescribed species of fossil plant. So it's amazing that there's a lot to do. There's a lot of science to be done, and discoveries just happen all the time. Okay, and not just for paleobotany, but for our department as a whole, we have this incredible team of people, of scientists, who all work together to make sure that the highest quality science gets done and gets published. So I'm just going to give you an idea of what our department sort of looks like what you could possibly be if you wanted to work in a natural history museum and maybe as a paleontologist. So we have curators and researchers. I'm a researcher, and we're basically the people who try to do the science on the fossils. And so this is me digging up some fossil leaves in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in southern Utah. And this is sort of our first step. We go in, we try to find the fossil leaves. When we find a layer of leaves that is really productive, then we will essentially quarry it out. And what's really fun is, so rocks are deposited in layers. And when a fossil leaf is in one of those layers, it's actually a weakness in the rock. So what we do is we end up tapping the seams of the rock with a hammer. And if there's a fossil leaf there, it'll actually just like split nicely open. And then we wrap them in toilet paper like a little mummy so that the really delicate fossil leaf doesn't get scratched or beat up when we throw it in our backpacks and hike it back down the hill and then take it to the museum. And just to give you sort of an idea of how kind of imaginative you have to be as a researcher and how much you have to think about what it might have been like in deep time. The rocks that I was digging in the last photo are about 75 million years old. And 75 million years ago, the Earth was actually much warmer than it is today, and the sea levels were really high. So the middle of North America was flooded by a shallow sea. And actually, if you're in Denver 75 million years ago, you would be totally underwater, which is why we go west to Utah, because that's where the plants were growing at that time period. And so today, this is what one of our field areas looks like. It's called Badlands. And what's cool about the Badlands is there's so much exposed rock that you can kind of read it like a book. You look at the rock, and with your knowledge of geology, you can say, oh, I think this environment looks like it was a pond, or this one looks like it was a river channel. And then you can use that information to go try to find leaves, because leaves are often deposited in sort of wet environments, as opposed to them just kind of decaying in a dry environment and blowing away and ultimately becoming soil. So working in an area with this much exposed rock allows us to find tons of leaves. And it's kind of fun to think about, you know, standing in one place through millions of years, because here today it's really dry. But if you go into the past, if you could be in Utah 75 million years ago, it would have looked like sort of like what the bayous of Louisiana look like today. It'd be these big meandering rivers, swamps. It would have been dinosaur heaven. So we have things like, you know, these Parasaurolophus, these ceratopsians, loads of crocodiles, some of which were like the size of school buses, turtles. Actually, it's really cool. We find bird fossils that have teeth. Birds today do not have teeth, but in the past they did. And so we find just the coolest fossils in this place. And my job, looking at the fossil leaves in the fossil environments, sort of gives it, you know, depth. It allows us to understand the whole ecosystem, not just the flashy dinosaurs and other things with backbones. So my job, my real job, most of the time is sitting down and writing up our discoveries. So our most recent discovery, we identified this type of plant from southern Utah from 75 million years ago. And we were able to name the species in a new genus. And also we're able to figure out that it's a type of plant called a laurel, which is actually a very distant ancient relative to things like cinnamon and avocados. And if you ever cook with like bay leaves in your stews. So it's kind of fun to think about all of these plants that we know of today and their distant, relatives 75 million years ago. And I also look at the interaction between plants and herbivores, specifically insects. And so here we see that there are caterpillars eating a leaf in the modern, but we can see that kind of damage in the past. And so it gives us multi-dimensional, or I should rephrase that, it gives us like many dimensions of biology that we can look at. We can think about what type of leaf it is, and we can think about what was eating it. And it just gives us a really rich view of the ecosystem that's pretty rare in fossils. A lot of times you don't get evidence of things interacting. You just get bones, or you just get a leaf or something like that. But when you actually have evidence that like something was eating something else in the past, it's very cool. Okay, so I'm a researcher. I conduct a lot of science. I write papers, but I'm not the only one doing important work here at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. For instance, we have fossil preparators, and this is our chief preparator, Natalie Toth, and she is not only one of the toughest paleontologists I've ever met, just an absolute beast, but she is highly skilled at helping us excavate fossils. And also her job during most of the year is to repair fossils that have broken. So maybe gluing bones back together. Oftentimes when we find fossils in the field, we will take them out with a lot of rock still around them to help keep them in the best shape possible. And so her job is also to help remove the rock matrix around the fossils. And so for this job, you usually need masters. Same thing with being a collections manager. So researchers would be nowhere without our collections managers. They're essentially the librarians of the specimen museum. So for instance, our chief collections manager, Gussie Mccracken, helps us to store the fossils properly. She makes sure all the data is correct. So you need, things like who collected this bone, where was it found, what age is it, things like that. Because if a fossil doesn't have any data associated with it, it's essentially useless to us. We have to have all of the information. And when you start getting 100,000 leaves, it's a big job to keep all that data straight and together. And so here you can see her working on some of our vertebrate collections, and she's making sure that all of the fossils are in perfect condition and are, ready to go to be studied. We also have a lot of volunteers and internships. So this is one of our interns right now who is actually working on her PhD at the moment at CU Boulder. This is Stephanie Plaza Torres, and we utilize a lot of people to do things like working on databases and cleaning up our data and things like that. And I have to plug it. So when you're a rising junior or a rising senior in high school, you can apply to work here at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. We will pay you to work with the scientists directly. So you can come work with me on paleobotany. You can work with some of the other paleontologists or in another department. So we have like biology and health sciences that you can come work with. So keep that in mind for the future if you're interested in working in a museum. It's a really great summer program, and it helps you prepare for college in a lot of ways. And another thing, if you're not that interested in science, but you're an amazing artist, we work with artists all the time to make what we call visual hypotheses. So this is where we've, dug up all these different fossils. We have all this data. We know what environments these organisms were living in, and then an artist will come in and basically reconstruct them in a way that's really fantastic. So if you look at each of these images, all of the fossil plants are ones that we dug up and described. All of the dinosaurs are as accurate as possible. So if you love art, scientific illustration is also definitely something you could look into. So I just wanted to sort of wrap this up with asking you guys, what do you think makes someone a scientist?
Someone who studies science and likes science.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yeah. So, being a scientist is something that we do all the time as human beings. You're making observations, you're studying science, you're making hypotheses, or what we call educated guesses. And then sometimes you're testing those. And we honestly do it as humans all the time. Like the other day I was sitting in my kitchen and I was like, what is that smell? I made an observation, there was a smell. My hypothesis was, it's probably the trash. It's very old. And then I went over and I smelled the trash and I was like, yep, it's the trash. And I had to take it out. So, that's a very dumb example, but we're always scientists. We're always doing things like that. So are you a scientist? Yeah. Yeah, you are. And now being a professional scientist is a little bit different. Who can become a professional scientist? What do you guys think?
What do you think, girls? Who can become a scientist, professional scientist?
That's okay. That's okay. I'll answer for you because the answer is super easy. Anyone can be a scientist. You can be a scientist. You just have to have a few things. One, you got to be curious. And you also have to try hard in school. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to do your best. And you also have to figure out if there's a field of science that you love. That's really important because you got to do what you love. So for me, it was paleobotany, but for you, it could be something like chemistry or mathematics or physics. You could be a doctor, or maybe it's not science. So it's just about finding what you love to do and what makes you really happy. So with that, I am happy to take any questions. And I also want to point out my email address because when I was your age, I was like pretty shy and I would have never asked a question in front of other people. But please feel free to send me an email for anything. But yeah, so does anybody have any questions about paleontology or working in a museum or anything like that?
So Girl Scouts, feel free to unmute and you can ask about, just college experience and doing a master's and a PhD, or you can ask questions just, generally about working at the museum, what it's like to work there with other people, and or if you're maybe working on your own a lot. So please be happy to, we'd be happy to hear your questions. Well, I've got a question then, Gussie. So do you have a favorite fossil that you've ever found?
Yeah. I mean, so I have to say, I love finding fossil leaves. I think it's super fun. But probably the coolest fossil I've ever found was a duck-billed dinosaur skull. It was enormous, probably about the size of an average person's desk. And what was really interesting was around the neck, there was impressions of the skin. So it looked like lizard skin. And I was just totally shocked that that would actually be preserved as a fossil, because we have the bones, which are hard, but the skin, is not that hard. It would decay. But anyway, the skin was preserved. And then, so we spent a field season digging it up and kind of packaging it up in plaster and burlap to protect it when it's transported. But the whole skull ended up being way too heavy for us to carry out of the field. And so we actually had to get a helicopter to come in and lift it out for us, which felt very epic, very kind of Jurassic Park.
Oh, I bet.
So
that's really neat. Okay. And so if you could go anywhere in the world, out of Colorado, anywhere in the world, where would you go to find fossils?
Well, I do love Colorado, so I'm in my first choice right now. But there is one really cool place I've never dug for fossils, and that's India, because India actually used to be part of the African, or part of the continent of Africa. It used to be attached to Madagascar, the island off of Africa. And then during the Cretaceous, it broke off and then essentially scooted through the ocean and crashed into Asia and created the Himalayas. So it'd be really cool to see what plants were doing on India during that time when it was just like an island in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would involve working with, local scientists and making sure that we have an institution that could store the fossils and use them as education. So working internationally can be kind of hard, and sometimes it's just more rewarding to work in your own backyard. For instance, we find a lot of dinosaurs in Denver when people dig out their backyards to make housing, like to dig out more basement or something like that.
Yeah.
So you can find fossils all around here.
That is pretty neat. Very neat. And it'd be so fun to be, doing something for your house and being like, wait, stop construction. And so what kind of advice would you give to the girls that are on the call right now or on the Zoom meeting right now, if they wanted to become scientists?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, work hard in school. You need to show people that you have an interest in science and that you're working hard. You don't have to have perfect grades, but definitely show that people maybe in college or even after in grad school that they really want you. They want to work with you. They want to do science with you. I would say maybe try to volunteer or get a job, maybe during the summers when you're a little bit older, to get some hands-on experience. So sometimes we'll hire interns for the summer in high school, or sometimes other labs might do the same. And if you can't get experience like that, that's totally fine too. Just take a bunch of classes and things that you think you'll be interested in. I remember taking a geology class in college, my first semester, just on a whim, and I fell in love with it. So just take classes that speak to you, and hopefully that'll help you find, what you love, what really motivates you, and what you could spend your life doing.
Awesome. And so you went to school here in Colorado for your undergrad, and and down in Colorado Springs, I think was right? And then where did you move on from there for your education?
Right. So I got a bachelor's here in Colorado, and then I decided that I wanted to work in museums and do research, so that those kind of jobs require a PhD. And I hunted around for a really good advisor, someone who wanted to do, or someone who was doing research that was similar to the research that I wanted to do. So I found someone at the Smithsonian. His name is Conrad Lavandera, and I went to University of Maryland and did my PhD in entomology there and worked at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. And it was a really fun experience, and helped me sort of land back here in Colorado.
Awesome. Well, girls, do you have any other questions? No. All right. Well, I have something to share before we sign off and do more. I'm going to share my screen. So this is new news. So there's something going on with Girl Scouts of Colorado now that I wanted to share with you. And it's called the Future Me Contest. So what you can do is you can do a video or you can do an essay, and it's just something fun to describe your future self. And two winners will be selected at random, one for the younger Girl Scout age and one for the older Girl Scout age group. And both of those Girl Scouts will get $529 put into a college invest savings plan. So the savings plans are called 529 plans, and that's why the 529 seems like a random number, but it was chosen on purpose. So it opens February 14th, the contest. It closes on the 28th. Your caregivers can check their emails because it's all been sort of, messages have been sent out on social media and things like that to give information about this. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So, and I wanted to also highlight the fact that there's a patch for this. So you can put on the back of your vest or your sash. So if you've already been in an Inspiring Futures, most likely I've already mailed out to you the middle section of the badge. But then we'll also add on for this session, the outdoors rockers, what they call the patches around the side. They're called rockers. So for this Inspiring Futures, you've earned the outdoor rocker. So that's something exciting. And I'll have a form that'll be sent out to your caregiver, just saying like how you enjoyed the event tonight and what you learned and things. And then you can check off, you know, which patch you need, and I'll get that mailed out to you. So that's that news. And, you know, I just wanted to thank Girl Scouts of Colorado and College Invest for sponsoring the Inspiring Future series. And I definitely wanted to thank Gussie for, you know, joining us today and sharing all of this knowledge that you have about paleontology and being a paleobotanist and what that is all about. It's absolutely fascinating. And Girl Scouts, I hope you enjoyed it and, you know, learned about your future and you know, how you might be able to work with Gussie at an internship or, you know, in the future. So, you know, last opportunity for questions. Anybody have one? No? Okay, awesome. Well, have a great night, everyone. And thanks again for joining us. We've got more Inspiring Futures coming up, and you know, you can sort of bounce around and see other female professionals and see if it's something that you see yourself doing in the future. Good night, everyone.